Before we begin, make sure to subscribe so you won't miss future journeys like this one. Tonight, we'll take a quiet drive into a story that began as two separate journeys, one in consumer electronics, the other in electric vehicles, and slowly converged into one of the most intriguing rivalries in modern business. It's the story of Apple and Tesla, two of the most recognizable brands in the world, each with its own vision of the future, each seeking to reshape the way we move. For decades, Apple's name has been associated with sleek design, intuitive technology, and products that fit into the palm of your hand. From the first Macintosh to the iPhone, the company built its reputation on taking existing ideas, refining them, and presenting them in ways that feel effortless. Tesla, by contrast, has always been loud in its ambitions. Founded with the mission to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy, it challenged entrenched automakers with high-performance electric cars that were as much about speed and image as about environmental responsibility. At first, their paths seemed unlikely to cross. Apple sold computers, phones, and wearables. Tesla sold cars. Yet beneath the surface, both companies were driven by similar forces: a belief in design as a competitive edge, a willingness to reinvent entire industries, and a confidence that customers would follow them into the unknown. In the mid-2010s, as the automotive industry began to pivot toward electric power and autonomous driving, those parallel visions started moving toward the same destination. Apple's interest in cars was never publicly announced in the way Tesla's product launches are. Instead, it emerged in whispers, job postings for automotive engineers, sightings of mysterious test vehicles, and the occasional leak from someone close to the project. Internally, the effort was given a code name, and like so many of Apple's most ambitious plans, it was shrouded in secrecy. Tesla, meanwhile, was delivering vehicles to customers, expanding its network of charging stations, and proving that electric cars could be aspirational, even desirable. The contrast in styles was striking. Tesla thrived on public attention, announcing bold targets and unveiling prototypes years before they were ready for production. Apple's culture favored silence, revealing nothing until the company was ready to control the narrative entirely. Yet both approaches were built on the same underlying idea, that the future of mobility would be shaped not by traditional car makers, but by technology companies with the resources and imagination to start from a blank slate. As we move through this story, we'll explore how Apple's car project evolved over the years, from early enthusiasm to leadership changes to strategic pivots that hinted at deeper internal debates. We'll see how Tesla's dominance in the electric vehicle market became both an inspiration and a challenge for Apple's engineers and executives. And we'll look at the crucial moments when Apple had to decide whether to compete head-on with Tesla or to take a different road entirely. We'll also consider the broader context. Why building a car is far more complicated than launching a phone. Why supply chains and regulations can slow even the most powerful companies. And how consumer expectations for vehicles are changing in an age of climate awareness and smart technology. Along the way, we'll visit the quiet offices where design sketches took shape, the test tracks where prototypes were put through their paces, and the financial discussions where billions of dollars were allocated or withdrawn. By the end of this journey, we may see the rivalry between Apple and Tesla not just as a competition, but as a window into the future of innovation itself. For now, take a deep breath, settle into your seat, and let the road ahead unfold, one calm mile at a time. Tesla's story begins not with Elon Musk, as many believe, but with two engineers, Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpenning, who in 2003 shared a vision for a different kind of car. They imagined an electric vehicle that could be fast, practical, and stylish. A far cry from the slow, short-range electric models that had failed to capture the public's imagination in the past. At the time, the idea was radical. The automotive industry was dominated by gasoline, and electric cars were dismissed as a novelty with no serious future. Their early work attracted attention from Musk, who had just sold PayPal and was looking for his next ambitious venture. In 2004, he invested millions into the fledgling company and joined as chairman of the board. While Musk's involvement brought publicity and capital, it also brought a relentless drive to move quickly and think big. Tesla would not be satisfied with building an electric car that simply matched the performance of gasoline models. It had to exceed it. The company's first product, the Tesla Roadster, was based on the chassis of a Lotus Elise but powered entirely by lithium-ion batteries. This choice of battery technology was itself a bold move. At the time, lithium-ion cells were used mainly in laptops and consumer electronics, not in vehicles. Adapting them for a sports car required solving complex engineering problems, from thermal management to power delivery. Yet, when the Roadster finally debuted in 2008, it proved that an electric car could accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour in under 4 seconds, travel over 200 miles on a charge, and turn heads on the street. Still, Tesla's early years were far from smooth. The company faced production delays, cost overruns, and doubts from both investors and the press. The 2008 financial crisis only added to the pressure, threatening to sink the company before it had sold more than a few hundred vehicles. Musk personally invested more of his own fortune to keep Tesla alive, and the company secured a critical loan from the U.S. Department of Energy. These moves kept the lights on, but only just. Tesla's next step was the Model S, a luxury sedan designed from the ground up as an electric vehicle. Launched in 2012, it was a turning point. The Model S offered long range, high performance, and a minimalist interior dominated by a large touchscreen interface. It won awards, impressed reviewers, and attracted buyers who might never have considered an electric car before. More importantly, it showed the world that Tesla could build vehicles in volume, not just as niche products for enthusiasts. As Tesla expanded, so did its ambitions. The company built its own charging network, the supercharger system, to address one of the main obstacles to EV adoption: range anxiety. It began constructing gigafactories to produce batteries at scale, betting that vertical integration would lower costs and improve supply security. Musk's public persona, unpredictable, outspoken, and sometimes polarizing, became inseparable from the brand, drawing both loyal supporters and vocal critics. By the mid-2010s, Tesla was no longer just an upstart. It had become a serious player, forcing established automakers to announce their own electric models and accelerating the industry's shift toward clean energy. Yet success brought new challenges: meeting production targets, maintaining quality, and navigating an increasingly competitive landscape. It was in this climate of rapid growth and high visibility that Apple's interest in the automotive world began to take shape. For Apple's leadership, Tesla was both an example of what was possible and a reminder of the difficulties ahead. If a small, determined company could challenge century-old automakers, then a giant like Apple, with its deep pockets and design expertise, might do even more. But Tesla's journey also illustrated the unforgiving nature of the car business, where engineering brilliance must meet mass production reality. Tesla's first miles had been marked by daring bets, near disasters, and moments of triumph. The company had survived when many thought it would fail, and in doing so, it had made the electric car not just viable, but desirable. It had also set a standard that any new entrant, including Apple, would be measured against. For Apple's secretive team, watching from the sidelines, Tesla's rise was both an inspiration and a challenge, one that would shape every decision they made in the years to come. By the early 2010s, Apple had already transformed two major industries, personal computing and mobile devices, and had left its mark on music, retail, and even wearable technology. The iPhone had become not just a product, but a cultural phenomenon. Each new release drew worldwide attention, and the company's cash reserves swelled into the tens of billions. In Cupertino, there was a growing question. Where could Apple go next? Inside Apple's leadership, there had long been a belief that the company should not confine itself to small devices. Steve Jobs himself, years earlier, had occasionally mused about the possibility of building a car. In his view, the automobile was a design challenge ripe for reinvention, an everyday object still rooted in decades-old thinking. But at the time, Apple had been focused on the iPod, then the iPhone, and the idea of entering the car business remained an idle thought, something for the future. After Jobs' passing in 2011, Tim Cook took the helm. Cook was a different kind of leader, less driven by personal product visions, more focused on operations and long-term stability. But even under his stewardship, Apple's appetite for large-scale innovation did not fade. The company was already experimenting quietly with wearables and health technology, mapping services and artificial intelligence, all of which could have applications far beyond the phone. Meanwhile, outside Apple's walls, Tesla was proving that an electric vehicle could capture the public's imagination. It was around this time that the whispers began. Apple recruiters started approaching automotive engineers, battery experts, and specialists in drivetrain systems. Job postings appeared that hinted at work in new product categories involving groundbreaking technologies. Former employees of major car manufacturers began showing up on Apple's internal directories. By 2014, the effort had a code name: Project Titan. In typical Apple fashion, Project Titan was not simply a plan to build a car for the sake of it. The initial vision, according to people later familiar with the matter, was ambitious. A fully electric, fully autonomous vehicle designed from scratch, integrating Apple's strengths in hardware, software, and ecosystem. The car would not just be a means of transportation, but a seamless extension of the Apple experience. Something that could connect effortlessly with an iPhone, integrate with Apple Music, and even serve as a moving platform for apps and services yet to be invented. From the beginning, secrecy was paramount. The project was housed in off-site facilities, separate from Apple's main campus. Teams were compartmentalized, with strict controls on who could access information. This approach mirrored the development of past Apple products, but the scale was far greater. Building a car meant sourcing thousands of unique components, coordinating with suppliers across multiple continents, and dealing with safety regulations in every market where the vehicle might one day be sold. Not everyone inside Apple agreed on the direction. Some executives argued for a gradual approach, focus on developing advanced driver assistance software that could be licensed to other automakers, rather than taking on the immense challenge of building a whole vehicle. Others believed that Apple should commit fully, even if it meant spending billions before seeing any return. This internal debate would continue for years, shaping the twists and turns that lay ahead. Meanwhile, Cook maintained a careful public stance. In interviews, he acknowledged interest in the automotive space and referred to it as an area ripe for disruption, but he offered no details. Apple's culture thrived on anticipation, and the company had no incentive to reveal its hand before it was ready. The outside world was left to speculate, piecing together clues from patent filings, supplier leaks, and the occasional photograph of a strange vehicle on California roads. Often equipped with sensors and cameras, sometimes registered to Apple. By the middle of the decade, Project Titan was more than an experiment. Hundreds of engineers were working on it. Prototype components were being tested. Partnerships with key suppliers were quietly negotiated. Yet the challenges were becoming clearer too. Unlike smartphones or laptops, cars required manufacturing at enormous scale in facilities far beyond anything Apple had ever managed. Delays and redesigns were inevitable, especially for a company whose standards for quality and integration were famously uncompromising. Still, there was a sense among those inside Titan that Apple had the potential to redefine the car as thoroughly as it had redefined the phone. The question was no longer whether the company could make a vehicle, it was whether it could make one that felt unmistakably Apple. In the next chapter, we'll see how this question collided with reality, and how the rivalry with Tesla, whether spoken aloud or left unmentioned, began to influence Apple's every move. By the mid-2010s, the outlines of Apple's secretive car ambitions had become clearer to those paying close attention. At the same time, Tesla was enjoying a wave of attention following the success of the Model S and the unveiling of the Model X. Both companies were headquartered in Silicon Valley, separated by less than an hour's drive. And though their products could not have been more different, the skills required to design, engineer, and build them began to overlap in unexpected ways. The first signs of tension came in the form of talent movement. In a region where skilled engineers were already in high demand, Apple began hiring aggressively from Tesla. Battery specialists, mechanical engineers, software developers. All were lured by Apple's reputation for secrecy and its promise of a clean slate project. Tesla, in turn, was not shy about recruiting from Apple, offering opportunities to work on products that were already on the road, rather than still hidden in design labs. The competition for talent was fierce enough to become a matter of public record. In 2015, Elon Musk, when asked about Apple's hiring practices, made a remark that hinted at more than just friendly rivalry. "They have hired people we've fired," he said in one interview, calling Apple the Tesla graveyard. It was a sharp comment, part bravado, part genuine irritation, and it underscored how seriously Tesla took the threat of Apple entering its space. Apple, true to form, offered no public rebuttal. Behind closed doors, however, Project Titan's leaders were well aware of Tesla's trajectory. The Model 3, Tesla's first attempt at a mass-market electric car, was in development. If it succeeded, Tesla would not only dominate the high-end electric market, but also make significant inroads into the broader consumer base. For Apple, this meant that any eventual entry into the market would have to be even more compelling, technologically, aesthetically, and in terms of integration with Apple's broader ecosystem. The overlap between the two companies went beyond personnel. Both were investing heavily in autonomous driving technologies, mapping systems, and advanced battery chemistry. Apple's test vehicles, spotted on California roads, often carried bulky sensor arrays, a clear sign of work on self-driving capabilities. Tesla, for its part, was pushing forward with its autopilot software, collecting vast amounts of real-world driving data from its growing fleet. Each was approaching the problem in its own way. Tesla, through constant iteration in the field, Apple through meticulous closed-door development. In the Valley's coffee shops and tech conferences, speculation about Apple's plans became a kind of sport. Analysts debated whether Apple would buy an existing car manufacturer, partner with one, or go it alone. Some thought the company might acquire Tesla outright, though the personalities involved made such a deal unlikely. Musk himself dismissed the idea, noting that he had once tried to discuss a sale with Apple during Tesla's darkest financial days, only for the meeting never to materialize. What was clear, even without official confirmation, was that the two companies were beginning to shape each other's strategies. Tesla's rapid progress made it harder for Apple to delay indefinitely, while Apple's sheer resources and design pedigree meant Tesla could never afford to ignore the possibility of a powerful new competitor. Investors, journalists, and industry veterans watched closely, knowing that any move from either side could send ripples through both the technology and automotive sectors. By this point, Project Titan had expanded to include multiple parallel teams, exploring different approaches. Some focused on building a complete vehicle, others worked on software platforms that could be adapted to different manufacturers' cars. This internal division reflected a growing uncertainty about the best path forward. Meanwhile, Tesla's relentless pace, unveiling new products, expanding production, and building out its charging network, was a constant reminder that in the world of mobility, time was a resource as valuable as money. The convergence of Apple and Tesla's paths was not marked by a single dramatic moment, but by a steady accumulation of small encounters, strategic decisions, and subtle moves. Engineers who had once been colleagues found themselves working for rival teams. Suppliers found themselves negotiating with two of the most secretive and demanding clients in the industry. And in conference rooms on both sides, executives weighed the risks and rewards of pushing harder into a space where the other was already advancing. As we move forward, the rivalry will become sharper, shaped by shifting leadership, technical roadblocks, and the realities of scaling new technology to millions of customers. For now, what mattered most was that the race had begun, even if neither Apple nor Tesla was yet willing to admit it out loud. From the outside, Apple's car project remained a mystery. No official announcements, no product reveals, just the occasional glimpse of a sensor-laden SUV driving through the streets of California. But inside the company, Project Titan was going through one of the most turbulent phases in its short history. What had begun as an ambitious, tightly focused effort to create a revolutionary vehicle was now grappling with the full weight of reality. One of the earliest challenges was leadership. The project had been launched under the guidance of Steve Zadesky, a longtime Apple executive who had worked on the iPod and iPhone. Zadesky brought a strong product design background, but building a car was unlike anything Apple had attempted before. The complexity of supply chains, the safety regulations, and the sheer scale of manufacturing required were on another level entirely. By 2016, reports began to emerge that Zadesky was stepping down, citing personal reasons. But insiders knew this change also reflected deeper questions about the project's direction. Following his departure, Project Titan saw a series of leadership shifts. Bob Mansfield, a respected Apple veteran who had previously retired, was brought back to oversee the program. Mansfield was known for his ability to cut through ambiguity and make tough calls, and his appointment signaled that the company might be rethinking its approach. Under his leadership, the focus began to shift away from building a complete Apple-branded vehicle toward developing autonomous driving technology that could be integrated into cars from other manufacturers. This pivot was controversial within the team. For many engineers, the dream had been to create an actual Apple car, a product that would carry the company's logo, embody its design principles, and compete directly with Tesla. Moving toward a software-first approach felt to some like abandoning that vision. Others argued that it was a necessary step, given the enormous costs and risks involved in manufacturing a vehicle from scratch. Technical challenges compounded the uncertainty. Developing a safe, reliable, autonomous driving system proved more difficult than expected. While Tesla's autopilot gathered vast amounts of real-world driving data from customers, Apple's closed testing approach meant progress was slower. The company's perfectionist culture, which had served it well in consumer electronics, became a double-edged sword in automotive development. Delays mounted as teams sought to refine every aspect before moving forward. Battery technology, too, was a sticking point. Apple's engineers explored advanced designs, including solid-state batteries that promised greater range and faster charging, but turning laboratory prototypes into mass-produced, road-ready units was a monumental task. Suppliers were cautious, knowing the risks of committing to unproven technology at such scale. Every decision carried cascading effects on cost, safety, and schedule. Meanwhile, morale inside Project Titan began to fluctuate. Some teams were disbanded or reassigned. Others found their priorities shifting with each new strategic directive. Engineers who had joined expecting to design a groundbreaking car now found themselves working on narrower software modules or supporting technologies. For a company used to clear, product-driven goals, the lack of a single fixed vision was disorienting. Outside the company, Tesla continued to make headlines. The Model 3 launch brought unprecedented pre-orders, and though production was rocky, the vehicle eventually became one of the best-selling electric cars in the world. For Apple's Titan team, Tesla's visibility was a constant reminder of the competition's momentum. Some Apple engineers privately admired Tesla's willingness to launch early and improve later, a stark contrast to Apple's insistence on perfection before release. By 2017, Project Titan had become a more focused but narrower initiative. The goal was now to create a complete autonomous driving platform, potentially paired with unique interior designs and user experiences that could be licensed or partnered into vehicles from established automakers. This was still ambitious, but it was no longer the all-encompassing dream of building an Apple car from the ground up. Inside Apple's glass-walled meeting rooms, this change was framed as strategic realism, a way to deliver meaningful innovation without taking on unnecessary risk. Yet, for those who had imagined a head-to-head race with Tesla, it was a quiet retreat. The rivalry still existed, but now it was shaped more by philosophy than by direct product competition. Tesla pushing forward with a vertically integrated whole vehicle approach, Apple refining software, and experience with an eye towards selective partnerships. What no one outside those rooms could yet see was that this was not the end of Apple's car ambitions, merely a recalibration. In the years to come, leadership would revisit the idea of a full vehicle more than once, each time weighing the growing EV market against the immense hurdles of entry. The road ahead was still uncertain, but one truth had become clear. Building the future of mobility was proving harder than even Apple had imagined. As Project Titan wrestled with internal challenges, Tesla was accelerating into a new phase. By 2018, the Model 3 was beginning to appear in driveways across the United States and Europe. It wasn't just a product launch, it was a cultural moment. Here was an electric car that wasn't a luxury for the wealthy or a curiosity for enthusiasts. It was priced, at least in its base form, within reach of a broader market, yet it still carried the sleek design and performance Tesla was known for. For Apple's leadership, watching from Cupertino, the impact was impossible to ignore. Tesla had managed to make electric vehicles not only acceptable, but aspirational. Demand outstripped supply, and images of long reservation lines outside Tesla stores spread quickly across social media. It was the kind of public enthusiasm Apple itself had cultivated for years with its iPhone launches. And now, another company was generating that same energy in a completely different industry. Part of Tesla's advantage lay in its speed. Elon Musk's approach to product development was iterative and highly public. Features were rolled out to customers even while still in refinement, and feedback loops were immediate. Tesla's over-the-air software updates allowed for constant improvement, blurring the line between a car's launch date and its final form. Apple's culture, in contrast, favored secrecy until the moment of release, aiming for near-flawless execution from day one. This difference in philosophy meant that Tesla could adapt rapidly, while Apple's progress, however meticulous, remained invisible to the outside world. Then there was Musk himself. His presence on Twitter, sometimes strategic, sometimes impulsive, kept Tesla in the headlines almost daily. Product teasers, cryptic hints, and direct exchanges with customers created a sense of accessibility and drama that no other automaker matched. Musk was simultaneously Tesla's most powerful marketing asset and its most unpredictable variable. For Apple, which preferred carefully crafted public messaging and avoided unscripted moments, this level of visibility was both enviable and foreign. Tesla's product roadmap also signaled a widening gap. Alongside the Model 3, the company announced the next stages of its vision: the Model Y crossover, the angular and polarizing Cybertruck, and even the second-generation Roadster with performance figures that seemed to defy physics. Each unveiling reinforced Tesla's identity as a company willing to take risks in design and engineering. Even when deadlines slipped, as they often did, the narrative remained one of bold innovation rather than hesitation. Meanwhile, Apple's Titan project was in a quieter phase. The company had begun public testing of autonomous systems, using a small fleet of modified SUVs equipped with sensors. Industry analysts could see that Apple was still investing in mobility, but the absence of a visible consumer product made it difficult to measure progress. For those on the Titan team, Tesla's rapid public strides created a constant background pressure. The knowledge that every year without an Apple car on the road was another year Tesla could cement its lead. There were moments when the rivalry surfaced indirectly. Musk occasionally referenced Apple in interviews, sometimes with a mix of respect and skepticism. He praised Apple's design prowess, but questioned whether the company had the risk tolerance to compete in the automotive sector. Apple, for its part, stayed silent, neither confirming nor denying its ambitions. Yet the moves each company made, hiring, partnerships, patent filings, were watched by the other with meticulous attention. Beyond the competition for headlines, Tesla was also influencing the broader automotive industry in ways that affected Apple's potential entry. Established automakers were accelerating their own EV programs, spurred by Tesla's market success and tightening environmental regulations. By the late 2010s, companies from Volkswagen to General Motors were announcing multi-billion-dollar commitments to electrification. For Apple, this meant that the window for entering the market as a first mover in electric mobility was closing. Any eventual Apple car would face not only Tesla, but a crowded field of electric models from brands with decades of manufacturing experience. And yet, there was another side to the Tesla effect. Tesla's success had validated the concept of the electric car in a way that no amount of theoretical market research could. Public perception had shifted. Customers now saw EVs as exciting and viable, and charging infrastructure was expanding rapidly. In this sense, Tesla was clearing the path for others, including Apple, to follow. The challenge was that the same company paving the way was also setting the pace. Inside Apple, the question was not whether Tesla was impressive. It was whether Apple could match or surpass that momentum on its own terms. The company's culture, strengths, and weaknesses were all being tested by a competitor that played by entirely different rules. As the decade drew to a close, the rivalry was less about direct confrontation and more about contrasting visions of how to build the future. Tesla's fast, iterative leaps versus Apple's slow, deliberate steps. The stage was set for a new chapter, one in which both companies would face shifting markets, evolving technology, and the looming question of whether the road to the future would be won by speed, precision, or something in between. By the end of the 2010s, Apple's Project Titan had settled into its narrower focus on autonomous driving systems. The grand vision of an Apple-branded car had been scaled back, if not entirely shelved. Yet the idea never fully disappeared. Deep inside Apple's walls, in meeting rooms far from public view, discussions about a full vehicle quietly resurfaced. Several factors fueled this renewed interest. First, the EV market was maturing. Tesla's rapid growth had changed consumer expectations, and established automakers were rolling out their own competitive electric models. Volkswagen's ID series, Porsche's Taycan, and GM's expanded electric lineup proved that large-scale EV production was no longer a far-off goal. In this more developed ecosystem, Apple could potentially enter without having to build every aspect of infrastructure from scratch. Charging networks, battery suppliers, and manufacturing partners were now more accessible than they had been when Project Titan first began. Second, Apple's own capabilities had evolved. Advances in chip design, particularly the energy-efficient processors developed for iPhones, iPads, and Macs, suggested that Apple could bring unique advantages to in-car computing. The company's progress in artificial intelligence and machine learning, much of it developed for Siri and on-device processing, offered building blocks for advanced driver assistance and autonomous features. And in the realm of design, Apple had continued to set standards for minimalism and integration that could translate well into a vehicle's interior and user interface. Third, leadership changes once again shifted the tone. Around 2020, Doug Field, a former Tesla engineering executive who had briefly worked at Apple before joining Tesla to oversee Model 3 development, returned to lead parts of Project Titan. Field's presence was a bridge between the two worlds. He understood the urgency and iteration speed of Tesla, but also the meticulous culture of Apple. His appointment signaled that the company was serious about exploring a full car once more, even if the timeline remained uncertain. The renewed push began with feasibility studies. Apple explored partnerships with contract manufacturers, including some of the same firms that built its consumer devices. It considered alliances with established automakers in Asia and Europe that could handle large-scale assembly, while Apple focused on design, software, and integration. Each path had trade-offs. Partnering could speed time to market, but might dilute control over the final product. Going it alone would protect Apple's brand purity, but involve immense capital and risk. During this period, the broader world added new urgency to the EV transition. Governments around the globe set more aggressive targets for phasing out internal combustion engines. Consumer demand for sustainable products was rising, especially among younger buyers, a demographic that overlapped strongly with Apple's customer base. The convergence of environmental policy, technological readiness, and brand alignment made the idea of an Apple car more compelling than at any point since Project Titan's inception. Still, internal debates mirrored those from earlier years. Some executives argued that Apple should stay focused on the core competency of creating a platform, the brain of the car, and let others build the hardware. Others insisted that Apple's strength lay in controlling the entire user experience, which was only possible with an end-to-end product. The shadow of Tesla loomed over these discussions. The EV leader's dominance showed the power of a vertically integrated approach, but also highlighted the volatility and logistical challenges it entailed. Meanwhile, prototypes began to take shape once again. These were not just modified test vehicles, but purpose-built concepts, designed in secrecy to explore what a true Apple car might look like. They featured clean, almost sculptural exteriors with minimal seams, interiors free of traditional controls, and advanced displays that blended seamlessly into the environment. Many concepts envisioned a fully autonomous cabin, with seating arranged for conversation rather than driving, a reflection of Apple's long-term view of mobility. As with so many Apple projects, progress was iterative and guarded. Suppliers were bound by strict confidentiality agreements, and even within Apple, only small teams saw the full scope of the work. Yet, the fact that these prototypes existed at all signaled that the dream was alive. Apple was back behind the wheel, if only in a planning sense, and the possibility of seeing its logo on the front of a car was once again part of serious internal strategy discussions. In the years to come, this renewed ambition would face the same fundamental questions as before. Could Apple bring something truly new to the automotive market? Could it do so profitably? And could it meet the expectations of both loyal customers and skeptical industry veterans? For now, what mattered was that the conversation had shifted from if to when, and that in the quiet halls of Cupertino, the race with Tesla was not over, but merely entering its next phase. By the early 2020s, Tesla was no longer the scrappy underdog it had been in its Roadster days. It was a global leader in electric vehicles, with production facilities on 3 continents, and a market valuation that, at times, exceeded that of the next several automakers combined. Yet, with size and success came new vulnerabilities. The very factors that had propelled Tesla into the spotlight now began to test its resilience. The first and most visible challenge was the global supply chain crisis. Triggered by the pandemic, semiconductor shortages rippled across the automotive industry, idling production lines and delaying deliveries. Tesla had long prided itself on its agility compared to traditional car makers, even rewriting software to accommodate alternative chips when supplies ran short. But as demand for EVs surged worldwide, even Tesla's adaptability had limits. Customers faced longer wait times, and the company's ability to scale production smoothly was strained. Battery supply was another pressure point. While Tesla had invested heavily in securing lithium, nickel, and cobalt, global demand for these materials outpaced supply growth. Prices fluctuated sharply, and geopolitical tensions in resource-producing regions added uncertainty. Tesla's gigafactories continued to expand output, but the race to develop next-generation battery technology, including the much-anticipated 4680 cells, proved slower and more complex than initial projections. Competition was also intensifying. Legacy automakers that once dismissed EVs were now fully committed to them, bringing decades of manufacturing experience to bear. Ford's Mustang Mach-E, Volkswagen's ID series, Hyundai's Ioniq 5, and Mercedes's EQ lineup demonstrated that stylish, capable electric cars could come from nearly any corner of the industry. These rivals benefited from established dealer networks and service infrastructures, areas where Tesla's direct-to-consumer model still faced criticism. Tesla's own product roadmap, once a source of relentless excitement, began to show signs of overextension. The Cybertruck, revealed in 2019 with much fanfare, faced repeated delays. The second-generation Roadster and the long-promised semi-truck also remained in extended development. While Tesla's existing lineup, particularly the Model 3 and Model Y, continued to sell strongly, the gap between bold announcements and actual deliveries drew increasing scrutiny. Elon Musk's public presence, always a double-edged sword, added to the complexity. His ventures beyond Tesla, particularly his acquisition of Twitter, later rebranded X, drew attention and controversy. Supporters admired his ability to juggle multiple high-stakes projects, while critics questioned whether his focus on Tesla was slipping. The company's share price, which had once seemed unstoppable, became more volatile, sensitive not only to production numbers, but to Musk's own statements. For Apple, watching these developments from Cupertino, the cracks in Tesla's armor were instructive. They underscored the reality that even the most successful EV maker faced operational challenges, market pressures, and the risks of overpromising. In strategy meetings, Apple's leadership noted that while Tesla still dominated mindshare, the company was no longer unassailable. If Apple could time its entry well, it might not have to dethrone a flawless champion, only to compete with one navigating its own growing pains. Tesla's challenges also had broader implications for the EV sector. Delays and shortages tempered some of the exuberance around electric mobility, reminding consumers and investors that scaling a new technology at global levels was never simple. Yet they also created openings. As customers waited for Tesla deliveries, some explored alternatives, giving newer brands and legacy automakers a chance to win converts. None of this diminished Tesla's achievements. The company had transformed the auto industry's trajectory and set benchmarks that all others still measured themselves against. But in the early 2020s, the narrative shifted from one of unstoppable ascent to one of managing complexity, balancing innovation with execution, expansion with stability. For Apple's Titan team, this shift was a quiet encouragement. It suggested that the window for entry was not entirely closed and that there might be room for a new competitor to carve out space. Yet it also served as a warning. The path ahead would test not only engineering skill, but also supply chain mastery, manufacturing discipline, and the ability to weather public scrutiny. The rivalry was entering a more nuanced phase. It was no longer simply a race to market, but a contest over who could sustain leadership in a sector where the rules were still being written. As Tesla worked to reinforce its position, Apple faced its own critical decisions that would determine whether it remained a behind-the-scenes player or finally joined the race in full view of the world. By the mid-2020s, Project Titan was no longer the experimental side venture it had once been. It had survived leadership changes, strategic pivots, and years of speculation. Now, it stood at a turning point. The decisions Apple would make in this period would determine not only whether the world would ever see an Apple car, but also what form that vehicle, or platform, would take. One reason for this shift was technological convergence. Over the previous decade, Apple had been quietly building capabilities in fields that were increasingly relevant to the future of mobility. Artificial intelligence, once a background feature powering Siri and photo recognition, was now advancing rapidly inside the company's research labs. Apple's custom silicon, designed for high efficiency and low power consumption, could process complex AI tasks directly on device. A critical advantage for autonomous systems that could not rely solely on cloud connections. In parallel, Apple's work in augmented reality had matured. The launch of AR-capable devices and the development of its own AR headset platform suggested that Apple envisioned a future where digital information seamlessly overlaid the physical world. Applied to a car, these technologies could redefine navigation, safety alerts, and passenger entertainment. Heads-up displays could blend turn-by-turn directions with contextual information about the environment, while passengers could engage with interactive content without ever taking out a phone. Sensor technology was another area where Apple had been investing heavily. The company's expertise in miniaturization, honed through years of developing cameras and biometric systems, could be applied to advanced LiDAR, radar, and computer vision modules. These sensors were essential for high-level driver assistance and eventual autonomy. And Apple's ability to integrate hardware and software into a seamless whole gave it a potential edge in user experience. At the same time, the competitive landscape was shifting again. Tesla continued to dominate headlines, but its approach to autonomy, relying on camera-based systems without LiDAR, was controversial in parts of the industry. Other automakers were betting on multi-sensor arrays for redundancy and safety. Apple's leaders saw an opening. If the company could deliver a vehicle with demonstrably safer and more reliable self-driving capabilities, it could differentiate itself not just on design, but on trust. Internally, debate remained over the scale of Apple's ambition. Some executives favored launching a fully Apple-branded car, leaning on the company's design, AI, and AR strengths to create a product unlike anything else on the road. Others proposed a more modular approach, developing a complete autonomous driving platform and immersive interior interface that could be licensed to multiple manufacturers. This second path could allow Apple to influence the automotive market without assuming the risks of mass vehicle production. Market conditions added urgency. Governments were tightening emissions standards, pushing automakers toward electrification whether they were ready or not. The infrastructure for EVs was expanding, and public acceptance was higher than ever. Yet, the longer Apple delayed, the more crowded the market became. Every quarter brought new electric models from both startups and legacy brands, each with their own claims to innovation. The question was no longer whether customers would embrace EVs, but whether Apple could offer a version so distinctive that it justified the wait. The rivalry with Tesla remained an unspoken but constant presence in these discussions. Tesla's strengths, its charging network, brand loyalty, and integration between hardware and software mirrored Apple's in the tech world. But Tesla's weaknesses, supply chain fragility, product delays, and occasional quality control issues hinted at where Apple might outmaneuver its rival. If Apple could combine Tesla's aspirational appeal with its own reputation for refinement and ecosystem integration, it could potentially redefine the premium EV segment. Prototype work accelerated in this period. Apple's design studios explored vehicles with open, lounge-like interiors, removing the steering wheel entirely in some concepts. Others retained conventional controls, but emphasized adaptive seating, personalized lighting, and responsive AR displays. In these spaces, AI would anticipate user needs, adjusting everything from temperature to music selection without a spoken command. The goal was not just to make a car, but to create a moving extension of the Apple experience, one where the lines between mobility, entertainment, and productivity blurred. For the Titan team, this was a moment of clarity. The technologies Apple had been developing for other products, AI chips, AR interfaces, precision sensors, were no longer separate threads. They were now part of a single tapestry, one that could support a bold entry into the automotive world. Whether that entry would come as a standalone car or as a platform was still undecided, but the building blocks were in place. As the decade progressed, the sense inside Apple was that time was running short. Tesla was still innovating, and other competitors were rising fast. The next move had to be decisive, and it had to play to Apple's strengths. The new playbook was ready. All that remained was to put it into action. As the story of Apple and Tesla winds into the present day, it is clear that this rivalry has never been a simple race to the finish line. It has been a slow, winding journey shaped by different philosophies, different strengths, and different interpretations of what the future of mobility should be. In some ways, the two companies have mirrored each other, each obsessed with integration between hardware and software, each commanding intense brand loyalty, and each led, at various points, by strong personalities whose visions shaped the work. In other ways, they could not be more different. Tesla thrives on speed. Its products often launch before they are perfect, with the expectation that they will evolve in the hands of customers. Elon Musk's public persona drives constant attention, keeping Tesla at the center of conversations about technology, energy, and the future. Apple, by contrast, moves with deliberate caution. It avoids the public learning curve, revealing products only when it believes they are ready for a polished debut. For Tesla, iteration is the point. For Apple, iteration is what happens behind the curtain. Over nearly a decade of overlap in the automotive space, these approaches have shaped not just their own trajectories, but the wider EV market. Tesla's success has made electric vehicles desirable, clearing the path for other entrants and shifting the priorities of legacy automakers. Apple's presence, though quieter, has influenced suppliers, talent markets, and the expectations of what a technology company might bring to the automotive world. Even without a public product, Apple's weight in the industry has been felt in subtle but significant ways. Now, as both companies look ahead, the challenges are as large as the opportunities. The automotive industry is in the midst of multiple transformations at once: electrification, automation, and the integration of digital services into every aspect of the driving experience. Governments are tightening emissions rules, cities are rethinking transportation infrastructure, and customers are beginning to expect cars to function more like connected devices than mechanical tools. For Tesla, the path forward involves maintaining its lead while scaling responsibly. Quality control, service infrastructure, and the ability to deliver on ambitious timelines will be as important as headline-grabbing innovations. The company must navigate an increasingly competitive field, where its early mover advantage is no longer unchallenged. For Apple, the road remains unpaved. The company has the resources, talent, and technological foundation to enter the automotive market in a way that could be transformative. But it also faces the question of timing. Enter too soon, and the product may not meet its own high standards. Enter too late, and the market may have moved on, with competitors firmly entrenched. The decision is not just about launching a car. It is about aligning that launch with a moment in which Apple can redefine expectations, as it has done before with music players, smartphones, and tablets. It is possible that the Apple-Tesla rivalry will never take the form of direct, one-to-one competition. Instead, it may remain a quiet contest of influence and philosophy. Tesla pushing the boundaries of speed and ambition. Apple refining the art of integration and experience. In that sense, the winner may not be the one who sells more cars, but the one who shapes how people think about mobility in the decades to come. Looking further ahead, the very concept of a car may change. As autonomous systems mature, as urban transportation shifts, and as environmental pressures reshape priorities, the vehicles of the future may bear little resemblance to today's designs. They may be less about driving and more about what happens inside: work, relaxation, connection, as the journey unfolds. Both Apple and Tesla, in their own ways, are working toward that vision. For those of us watching from the outside, the rivalry is a reminder that the future is not built in a single leap. It is built in thousands of small decisions, each made with a mix of ambition and restraint, risk and calculation. Tesla has shown what is possible when speed takes priority. Apple has shown the power of patience. The road beyond will require both. And so, we leave this story not with a conclusion, but with an open horizon. Somewhere in the years ahead, perhaps we will see an Apple car glide silently onto the market, or a Tesla that redefines what autonomy truly means. Perhaps the two will meet head-on, or perhaps their paths will continue to weave apart and together in ways we cannot yet predict. The only certainty is that the journey, for both companies and for the world they are helping to shape, is far from over.